We covered this on the Jimmy Dore Show yesterday, but we have a slightly different angle from which to cover it now. But just to inform you, as Israel withdraws from raid on Shifa Hospital, accounts from military and witnesses differ wildly. On Monday, the Israeli military withdrew from its second devastating raid on Gaza's largest hospital, Shifa, leaving it in ruins with the walls blown out and frame blackened. Despite the destruction, Israel claimed that the battle as a victory in its battle. Israel claimed the battle as a victory in its battle against Hamas militants and said it hadn't harmed civilians sheltering inside the hospital. But accounts from observers on the ground and the World Health Organization tell a different story. They describe a terrifying 2-week raid during which more than a dozen civilians died and others were brutally detained and trapped inside a facility with dwindling supplies. Israel said its forces launched the surprise attack March 18th. This is, by the way, for those who don't know, most of you probably do, this is in Gaza City, which is in the northern region, which Netanyahu said was all cleared out. Just a few weeks ago, when he was pushing his ground invasion of Rafah, and CNN asked him, well, where are people supposed to go? He said they can go back up here because those areas have all been cleared out. That's what he said. And now, surprise attack on Al-Shifa Hospital, which was already under siege in the past, just recently. After 2 weeks of battles inside Shifa, the military had killed 200 militants, spokesperson Daniel Hagari told reporters on Monday. He maintained that no civilians sheltering inside the hospital were harmed and said forces had provided some 6,000 Palestinians sheltering there with food, water, and medicine. The army deployed medical teams and Arabic speakers to communicate and help those inside before evacuating everyone effectively, he said. But World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom, sorry if I got that wrong. Oh, that's not even the worst of it. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said Sunday that 21 patients inside the hospital had died since the start of the siege. He said 107 patients had been left inside the hospital, including young children and adults in critical condition. He said they lack health support, medical care, and supplies. Since yesterday, only one bottle of water remains for every 15 people. Contagious diseases are spreading due to extremely unsanitary conditions and a lack of water, he wrote on X. One bottle of water for every 15 people. The raid triggered days of fighting for blocks around Shifa. Witnesses and journalists reported airstrikes, the shelling of homes, and troops forcing residents to evacuate. One resident, Mohammed Al-Sheikh, said Israeli fighter jets were hitting anything moving in the area. Another, Balsef Al-Hilu, said 7 relatives were killed in Israeli airstrikes. There was a massacre in my uncle's house, he said Monday morning, as hundreds returned to bury the dead, examine damage, or search for loved ones. The situation was indescribable. The Israeli military did not comment on any civilian deaths near or outside the hospital. Israel said it arrested 900 suspected militants. Of those, Israel said it has confirmed 500 are militants, some of them high-level commanders and members of Hamas's top political echelon. But accounts from the Gaza Ministry of Health and Al Jazeera, a Qatari-based media network, said medical workers and journalists were among those detained and brutalized by Israeli forces. A group of reporters was handcuffed, blindfolded, and stripped of their clothes for 12 hours, a statement from Al Jazeera said. Israel's military did not respond to an AP request for comment on the allegation. So you could see, obviously, conflicting accounts of what happened. Who do you think, whose word is better? Right, yeah. Wonder who to believe. But here's a doctor who has been to Gaza just back recently. Her name is Tanya Haj-Hassan. She is the founder of Gaza Medic Voices, which is a social media handle, and she also works with Doctors Without Borders. So she's been there. She's been to the Al-Aqsa hospital. And so she was not having it when asked to verify what Israel's been saying about their operation at Al-Shifa. Here she is on Sky News shutting this down with obvious and justified frustration in her voice. So here is Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan.
I look, the picture you paint is one of devastation. You'll know that the Israeli military say that they have killed and detained hundreds of Hamas militants within the Al-Shifa complex. Do you know if Hamas were there and were fighting with the Israelis?
I am just shocked that we're still having this conversation. They executed tens of people point blank, including one of our colleagues, Dr. Ahmed Khalalati, who's a very experienced plastic surgeon, him and his mother, who's also a physician. They executed people point blank. And including many of our colleagues who've been detained now, we haven't heard back from them. Previous students of mine detained, young doctors detained. We don't know if they're dead or alive. They have been gone for over 100 days. So to say that this is a strategic targeting of Hamas is an insult to our intellect and our humanity. This is this is a destruction of people who heal. This is a direct targeting of healthcare workers. I just want to paint a very brief picture of what healthcare workers are telling me there. They're saying that when they leave the hospital, civilians give them civilian clothing because wearing scrubs is sticking a target sticker on their back. That is how systematically healthcare has been targeted. And frankly, you know, in the last 24 hours, what we've seen from Al-Shifa hospital, what we've seen from Al-Aqsa hospital, and what I worry is coming to the remaining hospitals of Gaza, of the Gaza Strip, because it has been the pattern and we will not ignore it, is a direct and systematic targeting of healthcare that is unjustifiable.
That's how you do it. That's how you shut that down. Are you seriously asking me that? This is a doctor who is, like I said, just back recently. She's been to Gaza. She knows people who were killed. And she said that her colleagues say that civilians hand them civilian clothing because healthcare has been systematically targeted.
Right.
This is just an example of that. This is not a one-off, far from it. Al-Shifa was raided in the past, saying this is a Hamas command center. The Washington Post did a report saying they found very weak evidence to suggest any Hamas presence there at all. None really
CNN
to corroborate.
did a report debunking it.
Yeah, yep. None that would corroborate that it was a command center. Doctors Without Borders had a convoy that was hit by airstrikes. We covered that on our show as well. You see the logo, MSF, right on the vans with fucking holes in them. As of, I believe, late December, early January, 169 healthcare centers had been destroyed. I can't verify this now, but I think it is safe to assume that 3 months later, that number is north of 200 by now. But even if it's not, let's just, just to be totally accurate on the conservative side, let's say it's 169 healthcare centers. 169 healthcare centers, that does not constitute a systematic attack on healthcare and on healthcare workers. You've had Doctors Without Borders convoys hit, like I just said. Now you had Al-Shifa raided once, now raided again. We showed the images on the Jimmy Dore show last night. It's in ruins now.
Right.
It looks like the surrounding area just totally bombed out. And this guy's going to ask her about what Israel's saying about the hospital. Like I said, even if it were true, if a domestic terrorist shacked up in an American hospital, would we be okay with our government laying siege upon the hospital, destroying the hospital, cutting off power, taking out food and water? Would we set up snipers across the street saying shoot anything that moves, whether it's a terrorist, a nurse, a doctor, a mother, or a child? Of course not. Of course not. There's no excuse for what happened. Even if Israel's telling the truth, there's no excuse for what happened. And he's going to ask her about their claims. There's only one way to answer that, and that's the way she did. And I'm glad that that clip is getting some attention.
I think at this point, particularly with the next story we're going to be covering, I think we can safely say that Israel is quite intentionally instituting what one might call a final solution.
Well, this is a genocide. These were the charges that were brought in the ICJ. Right. That's not speculative.
You have to understand how Zionists and Israelis look at things. They buy their own bullshit, and their lies, in their view, are justified. It's a noble lie. It's a means to an end. Because for them, they are the indigenous people of this land who have taken it away from these barbaric, backward savages, these quasi-humans. And even though, and I'm not agreeing with this, but I'm telling you, this is how they think. If you talk to Zionists, if you talk to Israelis, these people are hapless at best. At best, they're very badly led. You know, it's a tragedy. But God, we've been the most moral army. We've been so patient with them and tried to live with them peacefully. And they've been offered their own country, and they refuse every time they're offered the country. And again, there's a lot of bullshit in there, but this is what they believe. Now they have committed the greatest atrocity against us after 75 years of us turning the other cheek and trying to manage the situation and doing everything that we can to avoid really responding in full. This is it. We can't ever let this happen again. And the only way we can ensure that is to wipe them out, to get them off our borders, and history can judge us later. By then, the land will be ours. That is what is happening here. That is what they are thinking. That is why they are targeting hospitals. They are targeting aid convoys. They have decided to go on a genocidal rampage, which in their view is something they've been forced into by 75 years of provocation with people that they repeatedly attempted to make peace with. That's the Zionist worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. And that explains what they've done and what they continue to do, as we'll demonstrate in the next segment. And this is obvious. This was obvious to me, someone who is far from an expert on this issue. As soon as October 7th happened, I said, well, this is the pretext they need to do what they've wanted to do forever, for as long as they have been an entity. It's not a mystery. It didn't take a genius or a scholar, I am neither, to know that this was what was going to happen. And here it's happening.
Please clap.